Hello! Today is officially January 1st, 2026. Happy New Year. And if you didn't know, I love to read. I love to read a decent amount. And this year, for the first time ever, I set a reading goal for myself. I said I wanted to read 10 books. This year, I actually also got into reading manga and fell in love with it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what books I read this year, what manga I read this year, what my reading goal was, if I hit that reading goal, and some of my reading goals for the next year. Gotta pull out the handy dandy cell phone for this, because this has the Google Doc on it where I listed everything. So my 2025 reading goal was 10 books. I wanted to read 10 books. And I specifically wanted to read 10 traditional books, not 10 manga. Even when I started reading manga, I wanted to be reading more books than I did manga. And in total, combined, I read 22 books in manga. For manga, I read Horimiya volumes 1 through 6, JJK volumes 0 through 8, and Given volumes 1 through 3. That brings us to a total of 18 manga. In terms of traditional books, I read Girl in Pieces, and then every single book's in the Hunger Games franchise. The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Mockingjay, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and Sunrise on the Reaping. And then there were 2 books that I started and haven't finished yet, and those 2 books are The Secret World of Sleep, which is a book about the neuroscience of sleep disorders, and also House of Leaves, which is an erotic literature horror novel. It's very complex. I think those 2 are understandable books to have not completed yet. The Secret World of Sleep, a little less so, because it is an easier read than House of Leaves. I just sometimes get bored of all the academic language. And so I actually read in books a total of 6. So I didn't hit my goal, but I'm not really upset about that. And I'm gonna be setting different goals this year, and I'll explain why. But first, I do wanna talk about 2 books that I read this year that I really think stand out. First off, Sunrise on the Reaping was amazing. Exceeding my expectations, amazing. I got really into the Hunger Games again around this time in 2024. No, it was around November of 2024 I got really into the Hunger Games again. The movies all became free on YouTube, and I was binge watching them while I was doing things like cleaning or doing my nails or doing my hair. And I started getting a lot of TikTok content about it, and then I just got curious and I wanted to read the books. And I read all the books, at least for the trilogy, very quickly. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes took me a little longer because it is a significantly longer book. And then I was there on release day for Sunrise on the Reaping. I actually didn't read the copy that I have above me. I read my best friend's hardback because I have all paperback for the Hunger Games, and I'm not a huge fan of, unless it's a special edition, buying a mix of hard and paperback. I'm a bit weird about that. I'd literally rather wait for the paperback to come out. I loved Sunrise on the Reaping. I really love how it genuinely subverted our expectations as readers and as people who thought we knew what happened in the 50th games. And I love that we got to learn a lot more about Haymitch. The epilogue was beautiful, and I cannot wait for the movie coming out in November of this year. I also want to talk a little bit about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because I've heard a lot of people complain about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. They complain about how long it is. People say it's boring, and I actually disagree with that. While it took me longer to read, it's because the book was definitely more advanced than the original trilogy. It was dealing with more advanced topics such as the nature of humanity and the idea of people needing a strong, firm hand of control in order to maintain a civilized society. That book was definitely more advanced, in my opinion, in terms of themes and the way it was written than the other 4 books are. And I think also me being a social worker, being a therapist, being someone who was in grad school at the time, and studying human behavior and learning about human behavior and learning about a lot of these theories, not in the same way someone who maybe a political scientist would or a sociologist would, but still learning about them and touching upon them, I think that kind of hit a special interest in a special niche area that I know a lot about, and that might be why I loved it so much. But I really, really enjoyed it. So if you're somebody who likes those things, I actually think you will enjoy The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and not find it to be boring, because I did not get bored at all when I was reading this book. I found not being in Coriolanus's mind, because we're not in Coriolanus's mind, but being adjacent to it and understanding what he's doing very interesting, especially as someone who watched the movie The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes first. Being able to go back and then rewatch that movie, understanding what was going on in Coriolanus's mind when he's doing all these things, especially in terms of his relationship to Sejanus, was very, very interesting, and it gave me kind of a new perspective on the movie. But my favorite read of the year was definitely Sunrise on the Reaping. I also want to note, I annotate all my manga. I annotate them, I color code them. They are works of art. I do it based on different themes that show up. One thing that I always have in there is love, because love is such a huge part of JJK. Whether that's platonic or romantic, I don't really differentiate, because in my opinion, love is love. And there is so much display of love in JJK. So it does take me a little longer to read the manga than if I wasn't annotating. The only manga I didn't annotate that I read this year was the Horimiya ones because I read those online. But that's a little bit about what I read this year in terms of manga and books. And now I want to talk a little bit about my goals for 2026 when it comes to reading. So like I said earlier, I'm not going to do like I want to read this number of books or I want to read this number of manga because that's really difficult for me. First of all, I was in grad school last year, like this last year until August. I was in grad school. There's a lot of reading that happens in grad school. I was doing 2 grad programs at once. I was getting an MBA and an MSW. And so I think 10 books was a bit of a lofty goal because I was reading a lot for my classes and it was advanced material as well. In my opinion, it is a lot easier to read a young adult novel than it is for me to read some of the articles that I was having to read for these classes. I'm also dyslexic, so my reading is naturally going to be slower, especially if I need to comprehend the book. Sometimes I'm reading the same paragraph a couple of times just to make sure. And it depends on the type of book I'm reading. A book like House of Leaves is going to take me inherently longer to read than a book like The Hunger Games. And so when I was really thinking about this and I was sitting and reflecting upon it, I thought more about what do I want to get out of my reading? What books do I want to read? What do I want to make sure that I do? And so instead of making one big goal of this is the number of books I want to read this year, I wanted to make some overarching goals and then have some more fluid goals. So my first overarching goal is I want to finish JJK. All 30 volumes will have been released by I think April or May. And with the fact that I didn't start reading them until the summer and I've already gotten through 9 volumes, I think I can manage to finish the series in a year. I'd also like to finish Given. Given is a 9-volume manga series right now. There is a 10th volume, but it's not released in like book form in English right now. And Given, aside from its heavy themes, is actually a pretty easy read. I think that manga is a lot easier for me to read, but that's because it's a lot less words. There are pictures to tell the story that say a lot more than the words do sometimes. The only reason it really takes me as long as it does is because I sit there and I annotate. But those are the 2 manga series that I really, really want to complete this year. Now I have 2 series that I want to start, and that is Horimiya. I want to restart it. I want to read it in paperback. I already bought the first volume. I started reading it online because I wanted to see if I was actually going to like it, and I really do. So I'm thinking I want to read and annotate it as well. And then I also want to start the Summer Hikaru Died. I actually just finished the anime series, and I really, really liked it. I already have the first 2 volumes. And I think I'm either going to start that after I finish Given or JJK. I'll probably finish Given before JJK. What I'm gonna do is likely break up each manga with each other. So like I'll read a couple volumes of JJK, and when I'm JJK'd out, I'll read some Given. So hopefully at some point this year, I'll be able to complete JJK and Given and kind of put them on my shelf as completed, and then start these 2 new manga series that I can bring into the next year to finish. Next, I want to get through half of House of Leaves. House of Leaves is a hefty book, a big book that is not only a lot of pages, and the pages are huge. House of Leaves is ergodic literature, meaning that you are trying to figure out the story as the story goes. There's a lot of appendices, different things you have to read. I've completed the Whalestow letters, which is an entire appendix in and of itself. And by the way, I loved the Whalestow letters. It was actually my favorite part of the book so far. It's very beautiful and very tragic. It can be difficult to read though. It is a difficult read. It is a very, very advanced book, and it can just be daunting and be scary. So I just want to get through half of it. House of Leaves is what I read to challenge myself. That is my fiction book that challenges me. You should be reading things that challenge you, not to the point that you want to rip your hair out, but that makes you think critically and forces you to do a little bit more comprehension and analysis. And I think I could also complete The Secret World of Sleep. I think I just need to sit down and actually finish the book. I'm pretty far into it, and it's a good book. It's just an advanced book. It's a very good advanced book. I also think the way that the author writes is in a style that is very, very academic. Once again, you know, it's a storytelling kind of academic, but it's still academic. And so sometimes it feels like I'm having to read a textbook all over again. But I'm not. I chose to read this book, and I do not DNF. The only book I've ever DNF'd is Uncle Tom's Cabin. And that is because it genuinely bored the hell out of me. I could not complete that book. I tried very hard. There's only so much time I have on this planet. Why am I spending any of it reading a book that I'm miserable reading? I understand the importance of Uncle Tom's Cabin and the importance of it historically. I understand that it is a beautifully written book. I just don't like Harriet Beecher Stowe's writing style. And then my final actual reading goal is to just read books that interest me and that I enjoy. I started You've Reached Sam recently, and I'm really excited to read that. After that, I'm gonna read You Found Oliver. And I do wanna pick up When Haru Was Here. I got the Your Name novel. When it comes to reading books in that way, I think what I want to focus more on is trying to read a little bit more frequently. I think I'm going to be able to do that more this year, especially since I'm not in graduate school and I don't have to read. But I still have a pretty exhausting job and a job that does require me to read a decent amount. I also think that last year I fell kind of into some pitfalls of trying to analyze super heavily every single book that I read. And I've kind of realized that that stole a little bit of the joy of reading for me at times. I don't need to textually analyze every single book I read. If I read a book and I want to go back and reread it and then do an analysis of it, I absolutely can. That's actually what I did with Girl in Pieces. I've already read Girl in Pieces. It is one of my favorite books ever. I got the deluxe edition and I annotated it. And I had such a fun time doing that. And I think that that's what I'm going to start doing when it comes to traditionally published novels. Or not traditionally published, but like traditional novels. I also tend to annotate like any nonfiction books, specifically things that are like academic, things like The Secret World of Sleep, but it's more like highlighting interesting things and making like commentary here and there. I want to read for enjoyment. I have a lot of books and there are more books out there that I will want to read than I will ever have the time in the world to read. And so my goal is just to kind of get through those. I'm going to start by getting through You've Reached Sam and You Found Oliver and the Your Name novel, and then maybe I'll purchase When Haru Was Here. There's a lot of books I have just in my room. There's a nightstand I have where I put all my TBR books. And I want to give a little bit more attention to that and reading it, but not reading it because I have to, reading the books I feel like reading because I want to read them. And I'm also going to challenge myself to just stop reading books that make me miserable. I know a lot of people will sit there and think, oh, well, you've been reading House of Leaves for so long and you've been reading The Secret World of Sleep for so long. Aren't they making you miserable? Should you stop reading them? And they don't make me miserable. They're just difficult reads. So they're taking me a little bit longer. And sometimes they're a little more daunting to read. But daunting does not mean miserable, if that makes sense. I think that there can be a lot of joyful and fun things that feel daunting. Anyways, that's my personal 2025 reading wrap. Hope you enjoyed this. Bye.